I've just had to ID verify myself to watch fights on Reddit. Are you joking?
Hello, my dears. So, life in the UK is becoming more and more dystopian. It seems like our government read George Orwell's 1984 book and decided this is a great manual as opposed to a warning. So, recently I tried to access Reddit, and as I was trying to access a subreddit, I was asked to either take a selfie for AI verification or upload a photo of my driving license so that I could verify my age to this third-party company or third-party site called Persona, which I've never heard of before. Now, this is not normal. I've never had to do this before, so feeling very confused, I decided, let me Google what this is all about, because when in doubt, Google. And to my horror, I discovered that this is all happening because of the new amendments that have been made to the Online Safety Act. The Online Safety Act is basically a legislation over here in the UK, which was marketed as something that was needed to be put in place to protect the children. We all thought it was just about porn and graphic violence, but turns out, no, even if you are trying to access something that has nothing to do with either of those two things, you will still have to verify your age and give up your personal information to these third-party sites that you've never even heard of before. Now, this bill was initially introduced by our Conservative Party.
This bill is going to be enacted very, very soon, and it's the algorithms which do the harm. And this act will be there, and you will be accountable to this act.
But it has been altered since Kier Starmer came into power, and the new age verification is not the only change that's been made. The amended version came into effect on July the 25th. Companies can be fined up to £18 million or 10% of their global turnover if they don't comply with these new verifications and all the other regulations that they are now putting into place. So this has led to some conflict between our UK government and other companies like Apple, for example, who are now suing our government because they argue that the new law will compel them to either weaken or bypass their end-to-end encryption, undermining user privacy and data security. They also argue that such backdoors would create vulnerabilities exploitable by hackers, criminals, and authoritarian regimes worldwide. And the company is challenging the legality and the secrecy of the UK's demands, insisting that they threaten global cybersecurity standards as well as human rights. Wikipedia is also suing our government, as they have argued that the Online Safety Act's regulations could wrongly label Wikipedia as a Category 1 service, imposing the harshest regulatory duties meant for high-risk platforms. These duties include mandatory identity verification as well as user blocking tools, which would undermine privacy, safety, and the anonymity of their volunteer editors, increasing risks like data breaches, stalking, or even persecution. The foundation warns that such burdens could diminish Wikipedia's volunteer-driven model and divert critical resources, as well as open the site up to manipulation and vandalism. Quick update on that. They lost. So there's also that. And due to how these new amendments basically make end-to-end encryption illegal, it's very likely that we will also, at some point in the future, lose WhatsApp. Now, this is a big deal because we actually love WhatsApp over here. I know that it's not really a big thing in the US, so you might not understand the pain that we would be going through if we were to ever lose WhatsApp, but it's a big deal. Now, a lot of people have already started to challenge the claim that this law is just about protecting the children and keeping children safe online. And a large reason for that is because a lot of people have started to notice that some of the stuff that's being blocked under this new law aren't things that are harmful to children or aren't things that children would really likely be searching for. For example, there's a lot of political content that's being suppressed. People have also found that help forums, so where people are discussing things like mental health or discussing issues like alcohol or smoking addiction, or where people are discussing things like LGBT issues, are also being blocked. There are also help forums like Dads with Kids, which from my understanding is kind of like a male version of, or a father's version of Mumsnet. It's where a lot of fathers who are either separated or divorced are able to kind of come together and assist each other and help each other navigate fatherhood. And then there are other really random ones that have been blocked. There's a forum for people who want to discuss Renault electric vehicles. That forum has also been blocked for some reason. And I don't really know Why? So because of that, people are kind of suspicious about the whole claim that this is just about protecting the children, because if it is just about protecting the children, we can understand why you need to block the corn. We can understand why you need to block violent graphic images or videos. But why are you randomly blocking forums that are discussing rental electric vehicles? And why are you blocking forums that help single dads? First of all, how is that harmful to children? And secondly, what child is even searching for that? So I'm sure you'll be shocked, like absolutely shocked, to discover that a lot of people are not very happy with all of these new changes that have been done to the Online Safety Act.
I've just had to ID verify myself to watch fights on Reddit. Are you joking? I've done a little bit of research and found out as of the 14th of July, the UK government passed a law saying that if you want to watch any explicit content online, you have to ID verify. What a bloody joke. What an absolute bloody joke. Saying they're going to protect the children. Mate, when I was growing up, we was watching Two Girls, One Cup, Pain Olympics, One Man, One Jar. Horrible, horrible stuff. I'm pretty sure there was a video of someone that got shagged by a horse and died. Incredible stuff. We grew up fine. Absolutely fine. You're ruining the youth of today. They're all going to grow up. No one's going to know what's what. They're going to run in fear when they see a man squatting on a jar. I would embrace it. Stare it in the eye. Enjoy every moment of it. Like a favourite pastime. Pure nostalgia. Bloody Labour government, mate. Ruining our days.
This online safety bill thing is driving me nuts, because it's like, did the government not realise that the reason we don't want to give our data to third parties, right, is because we don't trust them. We don't trust the government, we don't trust third parties with our data, because they're constantly getting hacked. And our data's constantly getting leaked. And for some people, that's super dangerous. Like, there was this guy on the news and he was like, I don't see why you guys don't want to keep children safe. And it's like, this isn't about trying to keep children safe. If you wanted to keep children safe, you would tell people to parent them better. Like, I'm sorry, but children shouldn't have unlimited access to the friggin' internet.
But without the Online Safety Act, how do we protect the children? Talk to your kids! If you are not mature enough to have a difficult conversation with your kids, then you shouldn't have kids!
The Online Safety Act wasn't even a Labour bill, and Labour are going balls to the walls to defend it, saying verifying your age keeps a child safe. No, verifying your age gives American companies your biometric data. And everyone, I've made a video on this, people like, well, you give your data away through your IP address. My IP address isn't my face. It's not my driver's license.
If the new UK law affects you and makes you upset, then you're a gooner. No, I'm sorry, but that is just not true. I have to use a VPN to view Sims 4 content on Patreon. This is just my opinion, but personally, I don't think that wanting Sims 4 furniture makes me a gooner. Like, I'm sorry that my 1960s style clock is so offending to you guys. But let's get real. Censorship from the government is a slippery slope.
And you can completely understand why people have an issue with it, especially when you consider the fact that data breaches happen all the time. I mean, just recently there was that story about the T app where people or women rather, were being asked to provide selfies of themselves for AI verification, or to upload a driving license as well to prove that they were female. And the app claimed that once the verification checks are complete, all of your data will be deleted and completely removed, only to discover after a data breach that that was not the case. A lot of the photos and the driving licenses that were uploaded onto the app for the verification checks were absolutely not deleted immediately. They were actually stored for years. Not only were they stored for years, but they weren't even correctly hidden or locked away, and so it was actually very, very easy and straightforward for people to access all that information without even needing to hack them. And next thing you know, people have their selfies and photos of their driving licenses uploaded onto 4chan. So understandably, a lot of people are very cautious about just providing their information and their data to these third-party sites or third-party companies that they've never even heard of before. Especially because you don't get a choice, right? It's not like, oh, you have to verify your age, so, choose a provider who can verify your age, blah, blah, blah. And then at least that way you can kind of research them and kind of look and decide who you would like to be the one who does your verification checks. You don't have a choice. They literally say, this is the company you need to provide all your information to. And if you don't like it, tough. So because the Online Safety Act, or the changes rather to the Online Safety Act, have been extremely unpopular, it has motivated people to start a petition. How these petitions work in the UK is that if a petition gets at least 100,000 signatures, then the government will basically consider it for debate. So because this has gotten well over the threshold for the amount of signatures that it needs, the government had to acknowledge it and address it. And basically the way that they've acknowledged it, or what they've said in response to the petition, is basically suck it up, buttercup. They have absolutely no intention of repealing this act or repealing the changes they've made to the act. So yeah, but people are still signing the petition anyway. I'm guessing people think that maybe if they sign it with enough signatures, they'll kind of realize, okay, this is a big deal. I have no idea, but as it stands at the moment, they have no intention to change anything. So as I mentioned before, many aren't really buying the whole "this is to protect the children" narrative that the government are pushing, largely because this is also the same party that did very little to protect young girls across the country from the grooming gangs, even though a lot of the hotspots where this kind of stuff was happening were in councils that were run by their government. If you care so much about the children, why didn't you do anything about that? And that could also be why they are suppressing news stories about that particular situation, because it doesn't really reflect very well on them. Which also brings us to the issue of censorship, and how the government, very much, if they really want to, they can kind of block or suppress news stories that don't make them look very good, which is a massive issue, because that is the whole point of journalism, is to keep the public informed, especially when it comes to what politicians are up to and what kind of things that they're doing. And that having the ability to criticize politicians is a big part of what journalism is supposed to be about. And so if they're able to just suppress stories and suppress any criticism of them, then we have a very, very big problem, don't we? So for many people, they think that the whole save the children narrative is just a Trojan horse for them to usher in censorship and to basically suppress freedom of speech. There are also other concerns about this new act in terms of the actual platforms themselves. There are some people who are worried that this is going to give platforms an excuse to essentially harvest a lot of people's data en masse just to sell it off and profit from it. Data is very valuable, which is why you should protect it and try your very best to avoid just handing it out freely to people. There are also concerns about how this is going to affect smaller companies, or smaller websites rather, because in essence this whole new law was, even though in principle it was designed to target the big tech companies like the Metas and the, you know, those kind of companies is who this was really designed for. But in essence, because it doesn't really differentiate between the big tech giants and the smaller web pages, you could also be subject to having to pay an £18 million fine or something if you don't comply with this new law. And so a lot of people are concerned about what that's going to mean for smaller websites, and we have seen quite a lot of them just completely shut down their websites altogether, especially if they're based in the UK. And we've also seen some other smaller websites who are based outside of the UK simply blocking UK's access to their websites. And you can understand why, because if you don't have the money to pay for these third-party people to verify people's IDs, or pay for their AI systems to verify people's selfies, and you also don't have lawyers who you can pay to sift through this over 1,700 page guidance on how to correctly follow this law to avoid having to pay these £18 million fines, then it does make sense as to why they've just decided, you know what, it's not even worth it. But the problem with that is that if you basically wipe out all these small websites, then you are now giving these bigger tech giants and these bigger social media platforms or websites more of a monopoly on people's attention. And in doing so, you are making it a lot easier for them to have more influence on people, because there's no one else to contradict or challenge anything that they're saying. So it is in a way giving the big tech giants more power and more control. There's another concern as well, that kids are very, very tech savvy. They're definitely more tech savvy than the people who put this bill together, which is why parents themselves have been struggling for years to try and monitor and control their children's access to the internet, because there is really only so much you really can do. And I do think that the government is going to learn the hard way that there are always ways around these things. And that's what people are really worried about, because if you push people off the surface web because they can't access stuff that they want, then they're more likely, people think anyway, that people are going to be more likely to go down to the dark web. And so people are concerned that it could make children even less safe, because then they're going to see much more horrific stuff and they could be in contact with much worse people than what they would be able to access on the normal internet. So overall, it's all looking a bit bleak.
It's not looking good, man.
I have felt for a while now that the UK has kind of been going down a bit of an authoritarian streak. This is something that I was kind of wary of even before Labour came into power and started doing all these extra things. I felt it was already happening under the Tories, because if you recall, under the Tories we were witnessing people getting arrested, Christians getting arrested for silent prayer out in the street. We were witnessing people getting arrested for tweets or hurty words on the internet. We were also witnessing some people actually serving prison time, and we also saw people getting non-crime hate crime incidents recorded on their records. This is a route we've kind of been going down for a while now, even before Labour. Labour seemed to be up in the ante, but this is definitely something we've been going down for a while, which is why I made that video that I made before when I was talking about free speech. We are becoming less and less liberal as time goes on, and it's very, very concerning. I think it's very, very concerning. It's definitely something that we should be watching out for, because it's just so bizarre. I don't even know why this thing has been put into place. No one voted for it, but we're getting it anyway. But that's kind of how it seems to be over here in the UK recently, you know? Things just get put in place that you didn't even ask for and you definitely didn't vote for. Now, many people are already trying to bypass this new law. VPNs skyrocketed in downloads over here in the UK once this new law amendment came into place. They have said that they're not going to ban VPNs at the moment. Apparently they said they were going to ban them, then they changed their mind and said they're not going to ban them, so who knows what's really going to happen with that. But VPNs are allowing people to bypass these age verification checks, and I do wonder how that's going to work though, because the government have said that they're not banning VPNs, but they are monitoring how they're being used, which kind of tells me that once they see that people are using them to bypass the age verification, they probably will change their mind on that ban. But at the moment, the case seems to be that VPNs are still very much legal and you're allowed to use them. However, it is illegal to bypass this new age verification thing. So I do wonder how that works, because it seems like a very contradictory, nonsensical law, because you're basically saying you're not allowed to bypass the system, but you are allowed to use this thing that will allow you to bypass the system. So how is that exactly gonna work? Do you know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and my mum didn't understand fully how grounding was supposed to work. She would ground me and she used to say, okay, you're grounded, but you're only allowed to go to the park, to Tesco's, and play in the front garden. That's it. But you're not allowed to go anywhere else. Now, the problem with that, well, it wasn't a problem for me, but it was a problem for her, is that those were my favourite hotspots to hang out. If I was playing with all the other local kids in the area, that's where we would be. I didn't really go anywhere else that often, aside from those 3 locations. So I personally loved being grounded. It was the best non-punishment I ever got as a kid. It was fantastic. Obviously, I had to pretend, I'm so sad. Like, oh no. And it just kind of reminds me of that, really, because bless my mum. I think because she didn't grow up in the West, but she was trying to adopt Western disciplinary methods, but she obviously didn't fully understand how they were supposed to work, so she was making some mistakes along the way, which was great for me, but counterproductive for her. And so it makes me wonder if, in the same way that my mum was trying to navigate these disciplinary methods that she wasn't fully familiar with and she didn't really fully understand, if maybe that's what's happening with this new law, is that we have a lot of boomers and Gen Xers who are trying to control a system that they don't fully understand. The older generations do not understand the internet anywhere near as well as the younger generations. For the younger generations, this is their playground. They grew up with the internet, so they know how to navigate it much better than the older generations do, which is why parents have been struggling for so long to try and control what their kids are doing and seeing online. And the government thinks that they can be the ones to fix all of that and be the ones to do better. But I think that they're going to find that the young generations are going to have very, very interesting and very, very creative ways to get around this. And odds are they will probably run rings around them. And so it's going to be quite interesting, because I think the people who are going to be the most affected by this are really the older generations who also don't fully understand the internet. I think they'll be the ones who are just giving up their information and just to get through it because they don't know the alternatives to get around it. Which is also another concern of mine. If we normalize having to give up sensitive information on the internet in order to access websites, will this not make older people who are already susceptible to online scams even more susceptible to it? Because now it's the norm for you to have to give up private and sensitive information. Is this new law not going to just make an already vulnerable group even more vulnerable to scamming? Some of these third parties ask you to provide your credit card supplier as a form of verifying your age. So this has just created a situation where scammers can basically make fake versions of these age verification systems. The older generations are going to see these politicians on the news talking about, in order for you to keep the children safe, you need to be giving up all of your sensitive information, pretty much.
Let me just say to you directly, verifying your age keeps a child safe, keeps children safe in our country. So let's just not try and find a way around. Just prove your age, make the internet safer for children, make it a better experience for everyone.
And they're just going to think, oh, well, the government are the ones who have put this in place. I have to do this in order to follow the law. And then they're just going to be falling into the hands of criminals. So in the end, I think that the people who the government say they are trying to protect and say they're trying to keep safe, it's probably not going to work on those people because they know the internet far better than the people who crafted and put together this bill. Overall, in my personal opinion, I do think that this new law is a massive, massive overreach. I have major concerns about freedom of speech and about the censorship of news and the censorship of information that people can either find helpful or can inform them about what's going on around the world. The problem you have with these kind of laws is who gets to decide what is quote unquote harmful, because that's quite subjective. And as we've seen, we already don't have the same ideas on what constitutes as harmful content, because I don't see how a forum discussing electric cars is harmful, but obviously the government quite clearly find something harmful about that. So yeah, so I do have concerns about that. Ultimately, it's all going to be based on whichever party's in power and their biases and what they think is going to be harmful to you. And I think we'd be extremely naive to think that that's not going to be determined by what's in their political interest. I also think it's parents' jobs to protect their kids. I don't really agree with the idea of a nanny state. I think the government is supposed to be more of a referee to stop us from killing each other and to also protect us from harms outside of the country. I don't think it's their job to be our mum and dad. I don't think they should be, putting parental controls on adults, because that's essentially what this is parental control, but for adults. That being said, to try and add a bit of nuance to this, I do agree that there should definitely be some kind of censorship for porn and extremely graphic content online. It should definitely be harder for people to access that kind of stuff, especially young children. But this is going too far, because you're not just blocking porn and you're not just blocking violent graphic content. So that's my general opinion on this. I think it's a government overreach. I'm very concerned about how it could be used in the future. This has also made us quite vulnerable to tyranny, because if we have a much more authoritarian government come in after Labour, then it's a wrap. I guess if anything, this should be an example to other countries just how quick and easy it is to lose your freedom. So don't take them for granted, and definitely don't allow people to try and take away your liberties in the name of trying to keep you safe or trying to protect you or your children. If you're willing to give up your freedom for safety, odds are you'll end up with neither. So there's that. Anyway, if you found this video interesting, you may as well like and subscribe. Thank you so much for giving me your time today, and I shall see you in my next video.